I just watched Welcome to the Men's Group yesterday morning.
Wow! So it's fresh in your mind.
Very much so, because there were some things in that movie that were rather unexpected. So.
Oh, good. Well, I'd love to hear what was unexpected for you.
When I saw the trailer, it made it seem like it was very upbeat all the way through.
Yeah.
But it actually gets pretty dark when you start
Oh,
delving
yeah.
into the psyches of these men. It's not everyone is as cheerful as they seem at the beginning.
Right. It's true, and it gets lightened up from time to time with some comic moments, but it does. I think it ends on a very sober note. Let's say I won't say dark, but I'll say a very sober note. I also think that it has a lot of resonance also in the Trump era, when you have American men struggling with their idea of what it means to be a man in America, when things are changing, jobs are going away, men think of themselves as the breadwinners for their families, and in a lot of cases they can't fulfill that role. So that, I think, adds a darkness to it as well.
It's definitely a very topical film. There's a lot about that resonated with me as a husband and a father that you don't see too often in any film. Usually when you see a guy in a film, they're usually they're one or the other. They're either dopey or they're a Superman, more or less. You
Right.
never see that vulnerable spot, that right in the middle that we all deal with and we all kind of hide from everyone. We don't usually show that part of ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And you know, being a part of the film and living with the mindset of the film for many, many months, I forget that. I forget what you're talking about, that vulnerability that you don't see very often in a film or on television. I think that's really a very good point.
Your character seems to be the most kind of unaffected by the world. How was that to get into that kind of headspace? He kind of seems like he's kind of all right. He has a little bit during his little affirmation where his vulnerability shows through, but most of the time he's kind of like, I'm going to go along with this. This is cool.
Yeah. I'm struggling to get a handle on Fred. I'm still struggling with it, even after all these months. Yeah, I think you're right. I think he seems to be fair. He's worried about settling down with his sweetheart, and he thinks of her as a very straight, somewhat conservative partner, and he's worried about that. But compared to what the other men are struggling with, I'd say that Fred is he's the one who is not struggling with issues that seem to either overwhelm him or make him very angry towards other members of the group, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he's he has some wacky ideas, but every once in a while he says something that is a very concise and common sense response to what's going on around him.
So he's basically he is the eyes of the audience, more or less. He's the kind of just right there in the middle where he is our representation in the film.
I never thought of it that way, but I think except for his eccentricities, I think you're right. I think that he is maybe closest to the audience's point of view as observers of the dynamics of this group. Yeah.
How did you get involved with the film?
The casting directors, who I think are really capable people, they came up with such an intriguing array of men and women for this movie. Those casting directors put out a call, and my agency picked it up, and I went in to meet Joseph and Scott, and I read for them, and my first response to the script was a selfish response. I want to play this character. This guy is funny. He's out there. Occasionally, he comes down to earth and says something really sensible, and I wanted to play that part, and they liked my first reading. I can't remember if I did a callback or not, but they were thinking of me as they went about casting some of the larger roles. Mm-hmm. And finally, they offered me the part, and I was delighted to do it.
When watching the film, when I would see you in the background of a shot, you would react in very subtle ways to what's going on. When that's being filmed, how do you judge when's the proper time to do a response, or how to do a subtle response when you're not quite sure if the camera's got you, but you know you have to react in some way to the madness that's happening?
Right. That's a very good point. I think that you have to be present in the room at all times. Mm-hmm. Whether you know for sure the camera's on you or you're not sure the camera's on you, you have to be engaged on some level. And my general posture or position or demeanor in all of the scenes was to be engaged with what I was hearing, but not necessarily engaged, not necessarily looking at people. So a lot of the time I was sort of looking over people's heads. I wasn't looking directly at people. I wasn't really engaged with them visually, but I was listening to what they were saying, or I was off in my own world. And I don't know how much of that comes across in the film, but that's how I wanted to play his that's how I wanted to play his engagement when he wasn't talking. I wanted to be listening and thinking, but not necessarily looking at other people in the group.
I noticed that in the very last scene when you're waiting to take the other character home after kind of pulling him out of his dark spot. You're just kind of looking up at the ceiling and just kind of just visually taking in the new house. And it's just,
yeah,
it was funny just to watch that. I'm like, what is going through Fred's head right now?
That is always a good question, and I'm glad that that went through your mind as you were watching it, because I think he's aware of the dynamic that is going on among the other people. He's aware that Michael, the Joseph Culp's character,
mm-hmm.
is very awkward with the father of the girl that he had this improper interaction with. So Fred is aware of that uncomfortable dynamic, and he doesn't want to look directly at these two people who are going through this, who are in this very tense moment. And I think, he's looking up at the ceiling, and maybe something even takes his attention away from that moment between the two guys. And he's waiting for his moment to say goodbye to Timothy Bottoms and then escort the leader of the group who has fallen, escort him out and make sure that he's okay.
When you have this group of great actors together and you all have to have a camaraderie that's believable on screen, you all have been doing this group for a while now. How did you and the other actors get into that sort of friendship headspace? Did you spend a lot of time together beforehand, doing a lot of script readings together? How was that accomplished?
Well, we first all came together at a delicatessen in West LA. Joseph and Scott set up a breakfast brunch gathering, and we all met there and started to get to know each other. And then we spent, I think, the first 2 or 3 days of work. Maybe it was only the first day, because the shooting schedule was so short because of the financing. We just didn't have that much time to employ a crew and a group of actors. So it was a very short shooting period. But as I recall, we used the first day and maybe the first 2 days on the set in the house where we shot the film, and we read through the screenplay and talked about it. And as we were doing that, we got to know each other better. There were costume fittings where we didn't have individual costume fittings. We were all together in the house trying on different costumes. And so we had that period of time to get to hang out and get to know each other.
Out of all the other characters in the film, were there any others besides the ones you played that resonated with you on a personal level?
Boy, that's a good question. I'll say this. As we worked through the film, and it was 10 or 12, I think, very intense days. 10 or 12 very intense days. And one of the things that happened to me during that time was that I started watching Tim Bottoms, and I felt that he brought something very real to the character of Larry. And I just found it very compelling to watch him work, still trying to stay in character myself, but to watch him play his character. I felt that Tim has a quality about him that compels me to watch him, and I assume that other people have a similar reaction to him. He has that quality that commands your attention, I think, and so I think for me there was a connection and an empathy and an appreciation for the character of Larry, and also an admiration for what Tim Bottoms is able to do in front of a camera. I think he's had a lot of experience, and I think from his earliest days he's been the kind of actor who earns your attention. He earns the audience's attention. So that was a reaction that I had to one of the other characters, and I'm trying to think what else. I was entertained watching Phil Abrams perform. I can't remember his character's name, but I found it very entertaining to observe him and also Stephen Tobolowsky. Mm-hmm. So I was always intrigued with what Timothy Bottoms was doing, and I was also entertained by Phil Abrams and Steve Tobolowsky, and all the characters to some degree, but those three in particular. So it would be interesting for me to look at the film again and see if I was actually making a unique connection to any of those people.
It was you always caught my eye whenever I would notice you in the background. So there's always something that you're doing that is pertinent to what's going on. So that's why those are the things that stuck in my mind. Because usually when an actor's in the background, you're not always catching what they're doing. But for some reason, whatever Fred was doing, it was just always like, what's he doing? He's doing something.
Yeah.
I gotta make a note of this.
Oh, that's good. I'm really, really glad to hear that. That's good news for me, because I did try at all times to be alive and present and real in the given situation that we were enacting there. I have a question. Well, a question or an observation. Mm-hmm. I think that the film is really interesting, really compelling because of the subject matter, and I think it's very entertaining because of the way Scott Ben-Yashar, I think in particular, is able to turn gripping situations into comedy, to make the situation real, but then to give it an honest, realistic, humorous twist.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, is the great virtue of two virtues. One, the subject matter, and two, the humor. And I personally feel that the film would be really commercially viable and entertaining and informative if it were about 20 minutes shorter. I feel that it rewards the viewer for hanging in there for 2 hours and 15 or 20 minutes. There are rewards to be had, but I think that it would be even more effective if it were 20 minutes shorter. Maybe more, but let's say at least 20 minutes shorter. And I'm curious whether you have had that feeling as you were watching the film. Did you feel like this is good? There's a lot of interesting material here, but it feels a little too long. Did you feel that way too?
There weren't any areas that I thought where it felt like it was bloated, but I think there are some scenes that could be truncated where the point or whatever nuance needed to be there was established, and then maybe it lingered a little too long.
Yeah.
But I can't think of any performances that I would do away with in it. It would be the small things that add up over time. You know, cut a scene short by 10 seconds, or truncate a little bit of dialogue that maybe had a pause in it that was maybe too long.
Yes.
Maybe things like that, but nothing that would eradicate anyone's performance at all, because all the performances were great. But yeah, little things here and there that would take it down a little bit.
Yeah.
So like me, I watch screeners all the time, so I'm used to just sitting and just watching. But for the average person, probably just trim it down to maybe like a slim 2 hours, maybe 80, 85 minutes.
Yes.
If you like really wanted to go after that market, but you would lose so much. I think 2 hours is the golden point for a film like this.
Okay. Yeah. I do think that makes sense. I think maybe if you cut like 20 or 25 minutes, which is what I was thinking of, you might actually start detracting from what makes the film worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. It needs to be a very human film. I mean, you can't. It's not a slapstick comedy. It's not a situational comedy. It's a human story, and you have so many humans in there that tell a very specific story that relates to nearly every man in the country.
Yeah,
so you need all of that in there. There's just no way to get away with making it your typical Hollywood, throwaway picture. That wouldn't happen with this. It's too human.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I've been wondering what we could have done, or what Scott and Joseph could have done to make the film a little more commercial, because it didn't attract a general audience. I think people who are already interested in the men's support group movement love the film. They're overjoyed to see something that they believe in being affirmed on the screen. But I'm not sure how you bring a general audience into that world. And you watch a lot of films, and so you would have some real insights into how this film could be, how it could be appreciated by a wider audience.
Mm-hmm. I would hate to say this, but they would have to recut it as as a comedy where the focus of the majority of the laughs would either be on the bad things happening to the men,
Yeah.
or the nudity, and that would
Right.
be it. But that would be the main focus of the film, which would detract so much from the message that it has, which would be a tragedy to see that
Yeah.
happen.
Well, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because it forces me to think a little more carefully about my reaction, and maybe I've seen the film too many times, but I think that your reaction is very thoughtful, and I want to learn more about it. I want to check in with Fanbolt and get a sense of how you approach other films that you are studying and that you're relating to. So so my question is, how do I get to your website? I could Google Fanbolt, but
you just go to fanbolt.com.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been a writer for 21 years now.
Wow.
I used to write specifically for horror websites for the longest time until I just got burnt out, and
Yeah.
Fanbolt just needed someone that would just write, and I like to write, so I just came on. It's geekdom galore and independent films. It's so much more stuff that I can get my hands on. So
Yeah.
when I get to see films like this, I would never get to see just writing for Fango or Blade Discussing or something like that. And it's been nice to see these different kind of films come in that the normal person just wouldn't have readily available to them, that they wouldn't know about right away.
Yeah. Well, that's good news. Speaking selfishly, that's good news for us because you have an opportunity to nudge people in the direction of interesting independent films, and you can convey the message. Hey, here's something that you really should take a look at that you might have missed. And I also thought that your years of writing about horror films, you probably, you may have seen John Carpenter's The Thing multiple times.
Yeah.
That is certainly maybe one of the most appreciated films that I was ever involved in. The audience for that film is very, how do you say, committed or very loyal, and and younger people keep, other generations keep being introduced to the film and appreciating it, and it's very interesting to meet people who have who have had that experience and have become attached to that film.
John Carpenter's The Thing is a great film, no question about it. But my favorite film that you were in is actually Being There.
Oh, yes.
That is my all-time favorite Peter Sellers movie, hands down. And loving the book and loving the film, and then seeing your interactions with Peter Sellers as Chance was just, it was amazing. I can't imagine what it would be like to work side by side with that man, and possibly one of his greatest performances. And you have to be the straight man who just doesn't understand how this guy can go from being just a gardener to this national icon, which is almost, I hate to say it, it's almost very relevant to today. You can have almost an idiot front and center and driving national policy.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, and also I just want to say that that was my third film with Hal Ashby. I did a small part in Bound for Glory,
Mm-hmm.
and then a somewhat larger part in Coming Home, and then finally Being There. And I just saw the documentary film about Hal Ashby. It's just called Hal,
Mm-hmm.
and I recommend it if you appreciated. He made 7 classic films in 9 years, including Shampoo, Harold and Maude, Last Detail, and one other that I'm blanking on. Shampoo, Last Detail, Harold and Maude. God, I'm missing one film there out of the 7 that he made, but I had a great admiration for Hal, and it's not very often in today's world that you get to work with one director on more than one film, and that was one of the I think that's those 3 films for me, and just working with that man and watching him in the editing room as he went through post-production on his films, that was one of the highlights of my life as an actor, working with Hal Ashby. And then I did 4 pictures with Costa Gavras, including Missing, which is probably the best known of the films that I did with him, with Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another, the highlight of my career, is getting to work with those 2 directors on more than one film. So I recommend the documentary. It's hard for me to be objective about it, but I enjoyed it from beginning to end, and I recommend it to you.
I'll definitely look it up. I mean, it's got to be an experience to work with a filmmaker that treats it as a craft, not just as directing, but as an actual craft of
Yes.
creating something and molding it and finessing it. You don't see that too much today. You see it more as a production, not as a personal endeavor, which I think is the difference between Spielberg of old and directors we're seeing now that just kind of churn out pictures. You don't really see that anymore.
Yes, and one thing that you can appreciate as you watch the documentary about Hal is how fiercely he fought to make a film that he believed in. And what is interesting, and what I came away from the documentary thinking was, this was not just an artist with a big ego who was digging in his heels and demanding that the film has to be made my way or not at all. He actually had a feeling for the audience, I think, and more so than the executives and the money people that he was struggling with. He had his own vision, and it wasn't a vision that was so eccentric that it couldn't reach millions of people. So, and I think that's one thing that I came away from watching the documentary, that he fought fiercely to preserve his vision, but it was a vision that a general audience could connect with.
Mm-hmm.
He knew how to make an entertaining film that said something about the way human beings are and the way they live.
You have to have that right combination of directors and actors, which I'm sure is a task, because you never know coming in, if you're going to gel well with a director, right? I mean, during general casting, I'm sure there's a little bit of input there, but you never truly know till you're on set, and you don't know how your personalities are going to clash or anything
Right.
like that. And you've just got to nailing that cinematic gold is so. It's got to be so taxing. I mean, that's why I failed as an actor. I just can't. I just can't do it. I can't be that guy to give a great performance. So I really envy you and envy people that get to make movies. I get to write about them, but you guys get to make them.
Well, I love reading. I love reading good criticism of films. I enjoy being sort of jogged and nudged to think more deeply about a film. So I think what you're doing is really important too, because somebody can read what you have to say about a film in 10 minutes, and they don't have to commit 2 hours and 15 minutes of viewing time unless what they get from you pushes them in that direction. So, I wish I could write. I think it's a very important skill. It's a very important form of communication.
It's you can get burnt out on it really quick.
I guess so. I guess there are professions that look glamorous or rewarding and fulfilling aren't necessarily, if you do it every day, every week for years, there's an occupational downside to it, I'm sure.
I see that with actors too when I'm on set, and I see just like when there's like 20 takes of a scene, just the frustration that comes across those brows sometimes.
Right.
I just don't. I wouldn't have the patience for it anymore with my age. It's just kind of like just get it right, get it right, get it right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah.
I appreciate you sitting down with me and talking with me about this, David. It's been something I've been looking forward to all this week. Is actually getting to speak to you. It's nice to see this movie, Welcome to the Men's Group, and then get to speak with someone involved and get to know just how important the film really is. Not just from my personal opinion, but how it affected the actors and how you guys look at it from both a piece of art and also and how it'll be viewed by the general public. It's refreshing to get to talk about that without having to shill.
Right. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to somebody who appreciates movies in a thoughtful way, and you do. And so I've had a good time, and I had one more thought. Oh yeah, I think the film, since the Brett Kavanaugh drama, and the Trumpian cadre, the seemingly mostly white American men who follow him and who feel that he speaks for them. That's like the other side of the coin of the film that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I think it may be more relevant today than it was 6 months ago or a year ago. So, well, anyway, I'm looking forward to checking into Fanbolt and looking for your writing. Now, did you say your last name is Phelan? P-H-E-L-A-N?
P-H-A-L-I-N.
P-H-A-L-I-N. Okay, got it. Great. Well, good luck with your work, and if you connect with a large number of people out there, maybe they'll be turned on to watching the film.
It's definitely got my seal of approval, and I'm going to make sure that comes through in the article that I'll write to go along with this interview. I don't think anyone, if they have a chance to see it, should pass it up. It's definitely something that needs to be seen by a lot of guys out there that are kind of lost in between the different social movements that are going on and our president. They're kind of stuck in the middle and not sure. They need a kind of affirmation, and I think this film will provide that for them. Yeah,
I'm so glad to hear that. So maybe we'll talk again if I get another film out there. We'll check in again.
I hope so. Thank you again, David, very much, and I wish you all the best, and I can't wait to see what else you have coming out for us.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, and good luck with your work, too.
All right. Thank you very much. You have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.